Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. The bathroom was quiet, except for the faint hum of the shower as steam curled into the air, softening the edges of the mirror and fogging the glass door. The warm scent of soap and faint cologne lingered, wrapping the space in a comfort that felt strangely intimate. The faint drip of water and the sound of soft breaths seemed louder than they should, as though the walls themselves were listening. She stood by the counter, her fingertips grazing the cool porcelain sink, feeling the condensation in the air cling to her skin. He was close, closer than he should be. His reflection appeared beside hers in the mirror, tall and steady, his gaze not on his own face but on hers. Their eyes met, briefly, and then held a second too long. That silent exchange said everything words couldn't, something both of them knew they shouldn't want, but couldn't seem to pull away from. His hand brushed against hers as he reached for the towel, a soft, fleeting contact that sent a shiver up her arm despite the heat of the room. Neither moved away. The closeness wasn't loud, wasn't desperate, it was quiet, patient, a shared awareness that felt heavier with every breath. The sound of the shower, the rising mist, the rhythm of their breaths, it all seemed to slow time itself. Her pulse quickened as he leaned just slightly, his shoulder almost touching hers, the scent of warm water and soap mingling with the soft beat of tension. No words passed between them. They didn't need to. Every slow glance, every fraction of a second where neither stepped back, felt like a choice teetering on the edge. The steam wrapped around them as the shower's warmth filled the space, and for a suspended moment, the world outside didn't exist. She could hear the soft rush of water, feel the weight of his presence, and knew something was about to tip past the point of no return, and then, a single drop from the shower echoed in the silence, breaking the moment just before it crossed the line. The air felt heavier than the steam could explain. It wasn't the first time they had found themselves alone like this, yet every time, it carried a weight neither could name aloud. At home, laughter had become rare, dinners quiet, the distance between them at night stretching wider than the bed itself. What started as small moments, helping with a coat, a hand brushing fingers while passing a plate, had begun to linger longer, unspoken, building like a quiet storm. Now, in the muted glow of the bathroom light, the nearness felt different. Her pulse quickened as his hand, steady but tentative, rested lightly on the small of her back. The warmth of his palm against the damp fabric sent a rush through her, every nerve aware. His breath, slow and measured, traced softly along the curve of her neck as if he, too, wasn't sure whether to move closer or step away. She wanted to speak, to say something that would break the silence, but words felt too loud here, too final. The weight of everything unsaid hovered between them, heavy yet fragile. His hand lingered, fingers just barely pressing, and she felt her chest tighten, not from fear, but from how much she didn't want the moment to end. But then, he froze. His eyes, once fixed on hers in the misted reflection, shifted as if something unseen tugged at his thoughts. Slowly, as though the decision pained him, he let his hand fall away, stepping back just a fraction. The warmth of his presence faded, leaving a chill where it had been. She stayed still, her heart hammering so loudly she swore it could be heard over the running water. Her lips parted to say his name, but a sudden sound broke through, the soft chime of a phone vibrating on the counter, screen lighting up in the misty glow. The name flashing on the display wasn't hers. The silence deepened, heavier now, as both of them stared at the phone, the steam around them curling like a secret wrapping tighter, waiting for one of them to move. The hallway light was dim, casting soft golden shadows against the closed bedroom door. The world beyond it seemed distant, muffled, as if time itself had decided to pause for them. She stood by the edge of the bed, fingers nervously brushing the fabric of her sleeve, her breathing slow but unsteady. He stepped closer, his presence filling the space before he spoke a word. "Are you sure?" His voice was barely above a whisper, each syllable careful, fragile. Her eyes lifted to his, catching the flicker of hesitation in the dim light. She didn't answer right away, her lips parted, the air between them warming as he drew near, their shadows merging on the wall. His hand rose, fingertips grazing along her cheekbone before gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The touch lingered, neither of them willing to pull away. A single button of his shirt came undone, not hurriedly, but as though the moment itself demanded no rush. Her hand brushed his waist lightly, testing the boundaries of closeness, her fingertips trailing over the fabric just above his hip. The faint warmth of his skin beneath the material sent a shiver through her, her breath hitching in quiet response. He leaned in, close enough that his breath touched her lips, warm and steady, but stopped just shy of closing the gap. The silence was louder now, broken only by the faint hum of their breathing. Her eyes fluttered closed, and for a heartbeat, it felt as though the air itself might give way to something neither could take back. Then, a sharp knock at the door. The sound shattered the stillness like glass. They both froze, his hand still near her cheek, her fingertips still grazing his side. The knock came again, followed by a voice calling from the other side, muffled but insistent, pulling them back into the world beyond their moment. Neither moved, both caught between the pull of what almost was and the reminder that they weren't truly alone. The morning light crept in through the blinds, pale and unkind, cutting across the room in uneven stripes. The air was still heavy, as though last night hadn't fully left. The sheets were tangled at the foot of the bed, pillows out of place, a button from his shirt still lying forgotten near the edge. Neither of them spoke. She sat at the corner of the mattress, her hair slightly tousled, fingers absent-mindedly tracing the seam of the blanket. Every sound, the faint hum of traffic outside, the soft clink of a spoon against a coffee cup from the kitchen, felt sharper, louder. He stood near the dresser, straightening his collar, though his hands moved slower than usual, deliberate, as if buying time he didn't have. Their eyes met in the mirror's reflection, not directly. His gaze lingered, searching, but hers darted away quickly, finding refuge in the pattern of the rumpled sheets. It wasn't guilt, not entirely. It was something more complicated, want and fear, tangled so tightly it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. He finally broke the silence. Last night, his voice was low, hesitant, carrying the weight of everything unsaid. She didn't turn to face him. Her shoulders tensed, and after a long pause, she answered softly, "I know." Just 2 words, but they carried all the heaviness of the moment, the memory of closeness still clinging to their skin, the quiet panic of what it meant. He stepped closer, his hand brushing her shoulder lightly, almost as if to reassure her, but she shifted forward, out of reach. Her breath caught, though whether from his touch or her own restraint, she wasn't sure. She stood, smoothing her shirt, fingers fumbling with the last undone button. Without meeting his eyes, she whispered, almost to herself, "We can't keep doing this." The words hung in the air, fragile but final. Before he could respond, she turned and walked out, the sound of the door closing softly behind her echoing through the quiet room. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the kind that promised the story wasn't over. The soft echo of the door closing still lingered when his phone buzzed on the dresser. Another message, this one not hers. He didn't answer. Not yet. By the time he stepped into the kitchen, she was already there, standing by the counter, pouring herself coffee with careful precision. The faint sound of a spoon against the mug was the only thing breaking the silence. Her posture was composed, almost detached, but her grip on the handle betrayed the tension beneath. Across the room, another figure appeared, his brother's wife, visiting unexpectedly, her gaze flicking between them for just a moment too long. There was nothing obvious to see, but something in her eyes said she had noticed the shift in the air. The way they stood too far apart, but not far enough. The way their eyes refused to meet, only to steal glances when they thought no one would notice. Later, in the living room, voices and laughter filled the space from the others, but the two of them sat apart, him near the window, her across the room, pretending to scroll through her phone. The tension was a silent thread weaving through the air. At one point, their eyes met, just for a second. Hers softened, a flicker of longing she quickly masked, while his jaw tightened, a restrained anger at how easily she could pretend nothing had happened. She laughed at something someone else said, a sound just a little too bright, and his fingers curled against his knee, a quiet, protective jealousy stirring, even though he had no right to feel it. He looked away, exhaling slowly, the weight of the morning pressing harder on his chest. When the room emptied for a moment, they found themselves alone again, standing by the hallway, only a few feet apart. The silence between them pulsed like a heartbeat. He finally spoke, voice low, barely audible. "Are you just going to act like none of it happened?" She hesitated, her fingers brushing the phone in her hand. "I don't know what you expect me to do." Her voice trembled, betraying the calm mask she wore. For a moment, something raw passed between them, an understanding that neither of them could name out loud. Then her phone lit up. A message had just been sent, but not to him. Her eyes widened as she realized her mistake, the color draining from her face. The words, half a confession, half a plea, were now on someone else's screen. The quiet in the hallway deepened, heavy, as both of them realized the risk had just grown far beyond their control. The room felt colder than it should have, the air heavy and unmoving, as if the walls themselves were bracing for what was about to happen. The phone, still lying on the counter, glowed faintly, a silent witness to the mistake neither of them could erase. She stood near the doorway, her breath quick, fingers clutched around the strap of her bag. He was across the room, jaw tight, shoulders tense, staring at her as though the words would come if he just looked long enough. But they didn't. Then, the sound of the front door opening, someone else's voice echoing faintly down the hall. The wrong person had read the message. They knew. Footsteps drew closer, deliberate and slow. The tension grew until it was a living thing, coiled between them. She glanced toward him, her eyes wide, glistening with something between fear and desperation. His chest rose and fell, each breath sharp, his hands curling into fists before falling limp at his sides. The door to the room swung open. It was never supposed to happen. The figure in the doorway turned without another word, footsteps retreating down the hall. The echo of the door closing moments later hit harder than any scream could have. Neither of them moved. The quiet left behind wasn't peace, it was a wound, raw and open, leaving them standing in a space that suddenly felt far too big. She grabbed her bag, stepping past him without a glance, her breath shaky but determined. This time, when the door closed, it felt final. The house was quiet now. No footsteps, no voices, only the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen. The storm had passed, but the silence it left behind was heavier than the shouting ever could have been. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped tightly in her lap, staring at the faint crease where the rug met the floor. The morning light filtering through the curtains painted her face in soft gold, but her eyes were distant, fixed on something far beyond the room. He entered quietly, each step measured, as though afraid the floorboards might give him away. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The air between them still carried the echo of everything that had been said, and everything they hadn't dared to. "I'm sorry." His voice was rough, strained. Not loud, not pleading. Just real. Her eyes flickered toward him but didn't linger. Her fingers tightened together. After a long pause, she whispered, "Sorry doesn't change what we broke." He sat in the armchair across from her, the space between them feeling wider than the room itself. His gaze lowered, tracing the shadows on the floor. "I know," he said, almost to himself. "But I can't pretend it meant nothing." The words hung there, heavy, settling into the quiet. Her breath trembled as she exhaled, her thoughts a blur of memories, his hand brushing hers, the warmth of his breath, the weight of choices they couldn't undo. Finally, she stood, smoothing the creases of her coat. At the door, she hesitated, her hand resting on the knob. I don't know what happens next, she said softly, her voice steady despite the shimmer in her eyes. But I know, we're not the same anymore. She opened the door. The cold air from outside swept in, carrying with it the scent of rain. For a moment, she almost looked back. Almost. Then the door closed behind her with a quiet click, leaving him alone in the soft, golden silence. The story wasn't over. But for now, this was the end.